The fire crackled low in the stone hearth, casting amber shadows across the worn floorboards of the cabin. Outside, autumn wind whispered through the valley pines, carrying the first promise of winter down from the high peaks. Inside, warmth held steady against the coming cold. Caleb Stone sat in his chair, the leather cracked and shaped to his body after 25 years of use. At 62, his beard had gone mostly silver. His hands showed the thick knuckles of a lifetime spent working wood and steel, but his eyes remained sharp, alert. The eyes of a man who had learned long ago that survival meant seeing what others missed. Across from him, his granddaughter Abigail sat perched on the wooden trunk that held her grandmother's quilts. 19 years old, dark hair braided back, eyes bright, with the kind of hope that comes before life teaches harder lessons. Tomorrow she would leave for Denver. The university had accepted her application. A chance at education, at a future different from the mountain life she had always known. But tonight doubt crept into her voice. "Grandfather," she said, folding her hands in her lap the way her grandmother had taught her, "how did you know when to stay and when to go?" Caleb reached for his pipe, packed it slowly with the tobacco. The ritual bought him time to find the right words. On the wall above the hearth hung a photograph, edges yellowed with age. A woman in her early 50s, still beautiful, still strong. Dark hair pulled back, a simple dress, and around her neck, barely visible in the sepia tones, a wooden cross on a leather cord. His wife, his Willa. "Let me tell you a story," Caleb said, striking a match. The flame illuminated his weathered face for a moment before settling into the bowl of the pipe. "About the only time I chose to stay when every instinct told me to run." Abigail leaned forward, recognizing the tone. Her grandfather rarely spoke of the past. When he did, every word mattered. It was September of 1876. Caleb began smoke curling toward the rafters. 3 months after Custer fell at the Little Bighorn, the frontier was bleeding. Everyone scared, everyone armed, everyone looking over their shoulders. He paused, eyes distant now, seeing not this warm cabin, but another place, another time. There are decisions that change entire lives. Mine started with a whisper behind a waterfall. The wind outside rose to a howl. Abigail pulled her shawl tighter and settled in to listen as her grandfather's voice carried her back across 25 years to a world she had never known, but would come to understand. September 15th, 1876, Rocky Mountains, Colorado Territory. Dawn came cold to the high country. Frost painted the meadowgrass white, turning each blade into a tiny sword of ice that crunched beneath Caleb's boots as he walked his trap line. His breath hung in the still air, visible reminders that winter approached faster in the mountains than in the valleys below. He was 37 then, lean and hard from 3 years of living alone in the wilderness. His buckskin coat bore patches and stains, the leather worn soft from weather and use. His beard still dark brown, then showed only hints of the silver that would come later. He moved with a deliberate economy of motion, wasting nothing, the habit of a man who had been trained for war and learned to apply those skills to survival. The Spencer rifle rode easy in his hands, loaded and ready. Not paranoia, practicality. The frontier respected preparation and punished carelessness with an efficiency that left no room for second chances. Trapper's Creek ran swift and cold through the canyon, fed by snowmelt from peaks that never fully thawed. Caleb followed its course, checking each trap with practiced efficiency. The steel jaws of a Newhouse No. 3 trap, properly set and disguised, could take a beaver clean. 40 pounds of fur and meat that would fetch $4 to $6 at the trading post in Fort Collins. In 1876, with coffee running $1.50 per pound and ammunition 50 cents a box, every pelt mattered. The first trap held nothing but disturbed mud. The second the same. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had set 6 traps along this stretch 3 days ago. All showed beaver sign, chewed bark, distinctive tracks in the soft earth, dams freshly maintained. The animals were here. The traps should have produced. The third trap gave him his first catch, a prime male, thick fur just starting to darken toward its winter coat. Caleb worked quickly, dispatching the animal with respect, removing it from the trap, resetting the mechanism. He buried the trap again under mud and leaves, eliminating all trace of human scent that might warn the next animal away. By the time he reached his camp 2 hours later, he had 3 beaver, their pelts worth perhaps $15 total. Respectable, but not enough. Not nearly enough to see him through winter. The camp sat in a clearing ringed by lodgepole pine chosen for its sight lines and single approach path. A canvas lean-to stretched between trees sheltering his bedroll and supplies from rain. The fire pit showed fresh coals from the morning fire, and nearby a small figure crouched over the remains of a rabbit. Sam looked up as Caleb approached, his young face serious with concentration. 7 years old, small for his age, the boy had his mother's dark eyes and his father's lighter skin. Mixed blood, half Arapaho, half white. An orphan for just over a year since the raiders had come to his parents' cabin and left nothing alive but a terrified child hiding in the root cellar. Caleb had found him 3 days later, nearly dead from exposure. He had meant to take the boy to Fort Collins to hand him over to the Indian agent or the missionaries. That had been 13 months ago. Somehow he had never made the trip. "Got the hide off clean," Sam said, holding up the rabbit skin. "Like you showed me." Caleb examined the work. The boy had good hands, patient, careful not to tear the thin membrane or leave scraps of fat that would spoil the leather. At 7 years old, he already possessed skills most grown men never learned. "Good," Caleb said. "Now flesh it proper. Scrape with the grain. Against it and you'll tear through." He dropped the 3 beaver carcasses beside the fire pit. "We'll skin these after breakfast. I'll show you the difference between beaver and rabbit. Beaver hide is thicker, takes more pressure." Sam nodded, already reaching for the fleshing knife. The boy rarely spoke more than necessary. Another thing they had in common. Caleb built up the fire, added water to the pot hanging from the iron tripod, measured out cornmeal and salt. Simple food, filling. It kept them alive, and that was enough. While the mush cooked, he sorted through his supplies. The count troubled him. 18 prime pelts stored in the cache, 7 seconds. Not enough. Winter came early, this high up and brutal. He needed at least 30 pelts to trade for the ammunition, flour, coffee, and salt that would see them through until spring, which meant going to Fort Collins soon, before the first heavy snow closed the passes. The problem was Sam. The boy had no papers, no legal guardian. His mixed heritage made him a target for 2 kinds of trouble. White settlers who saw him as Indian would reject him, deny him schooling, refuse him work. The Indian agent would see him as a ward of the Bureau, subject to removal to a boarding school, where they would cut his hair, forbid his mother's language, and systematically erase everything that connected him to his people. Caleb had kept Sam hidden for over a year. Living this isolated, it had been possible. But Fort Collins meant exposure, meant risk, meant the possibility that he would lose the boy to a system that cared nothing for what was right, only for what was legal. "Caleb," Sam's voice pulled him from dark thoughts. "Are we going to town?" The boy's tone held fear. Last time they had ventured near civilization, a group of miners had called him a half-breed bastard. One had spit tobacco juice at his feet. Caleb had put his hand on his rifle, and the men had backed off, but the damage was done. Sam had nightmares for a week. "We need supplies," Caleb said, stirring the cornmeal. "Can't make it through winter without them." "I could stay here. You go alone. Not leaving you alone for 3 days." "I'd be okay. I know how to hide." Caleb looked at the boy. Sam's eyes held the kind of old pain that no 7-year-old should carry, the knowledge that the world was dangerous and that safety was temporary at best. "We go together," Caleb said firmly, "but you stay close. Stay quiet. And if something happens, if anyone tries to take you, you run. You understand? You run back here, and you hide, and you wait for me. I will come back for you." Sam nodded slowly. "I understand." They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackle of fire and the distant rush of the creek. When the meal was finished, Caleb began the morning work. Skinning beaver required patience. The hide had to be removed intact, a single piece worth money. Torn or punctured pelts lost half their value. He showed Sam the technique. The initial cut along the belly, the careful separation of hide from flesh, working the knife blade between layers. The boy watched intently, memorizing each motion. "Your hands remember better than your head," Caleb explained. "Do it enough times and you won't have to think. Your body will know." By midday, they had 3 prime pelts stretched on willow frames, flesh side exposed to dry. The meat went into a pot with wild onions and dried beans. Nothing wasted, everything used. Caleb counted his pelts again, added the 3 new ones. 21 total. Still not enough, but the weather was changing. Those high cirrus clouds meant a storm within 24 hours. If snow came early, the passes would close, and they would be trapped here until spring with inadequate supplies. He made his decision. "We leave tomorrow morning," he told Sam. "Pack light. 3 days down, 1 day in town, 3 days back. Move fast and stay smart." Sam's face showed his fear, but he nodded. The boy trusted him. That trust felt like a weight around Caleb's neck, a responsibility he had never asked for but could not abandon. That afternoon, while Sam gathered firewood, Caleb checked his supply cache. He kept it hidden 200 yards from camp, buried under a deadfall that looked natural but concealed a waterproof oilcloth bundle. Inside, wrapped tight, were his emergency stores: 20 rounds of ammunition, a pound of coffee, 2 pounds of dried beans, a small leather pouch containing $43 in coins and bills. Everything he owned in the world beyond his rifle, his traps, and his pelts. He pulled back the deadfall and froze. The cache had been disturbed, not by animals. Animals dug or tore. This was careful, deliberate. Someone had found his hiding place, opened it, and closed it again. Caleb's heart rate spiked, adrenaline flooding his system the way it had during his Army days. He scanned the surrounding forest, rifle coming up to his shoulder. Nothing moved, no sound but wind in the pines. He opened the cache fully. The money was untouched. The ammunition, the food, all still there. But 5 of his stored pelts were gone. Prime beaver worth $30. More importantly, someone knew where he camped. Someone had been watching him long enough to find his cache. Someone was tracking him. Caleb covered the cache again, moving with deliberate calm, even as his mind raced through possibilities. Raiders, rival trappers, Indian war parties, or worse, Army patrols looking for deserters. He was wanted. The bounty was small, only $500, but there were men who would kill for less. He returned to camp, taking a different route, watching his back trail. Sam looked up from the fire, read something in Caleb's expression. "What's wrong?" "Pack your gear," Caleb said quietly. "We're leaving tonight." "But you said morning." "Plans change. Move quick and stay quiet." While Sam rolled their bedding, Caleb did a final circuit of the camp. He found the tracks, 20 yards to the south, partially obscured by pine needles, but visible to a trained eye. Boot prints. A single man, judging by the depth and stride. He had stood here watching the camp. Recently. The edges of the track were still sharp, not yet weathered. One man, that meant scout, not raiding party. Someone tracking him specifically. The question was whether this was criminal or legal trouble, and which would be worse. By the time the sun touched the western peaks, they were ready. Caleb loaded their essential gear onto Grant, his mule. 15 years old, the animal was steady and reliable if stubborn. Grant had been with Caleb since his Army days, one of the few things he had kept when he resigned his commission. Resigned, that was the polite word. The true word was court-martialed. They moved south as darkness fell, following Elk Trail toward the lower elevations. Caleb set a hard pace despite the fading light. Sam struggled to keep up but made no complaint. The boy understood something was wrong, even if he didn't know what. They walked for 3 hours before Caleb allowed a halt. No fire. Cold camp. They ate jerky and hardtack, drank from canteens filled at the creek. The night air turned frigid. Sam shivered in his thin coat. Caleb wrapped him in a blanket, let the boy sleep, curled against his side for warmth. He stayed awake listening. Sometime after midnight, the wind shifted, bringing the scent of smoke. Not close, maybe 2 miles. A campfire. Someone else was out here in the darkness. Following. Dawn came gray and cold. They moved again before full light, pushing down the trail as the sky brightened from black to steel to pale blue. By mid-morning, they reached Clearwater Falls. The waterfall had been a landmark for mountain men and trappers for decades. 50 feet of white water cascading over a granite ledge into a pool so clear you could see the rounded stones on the bottom. The approach was steep, the path narrow, but the water was clean, and the spot offered shelter from wind. Caleb had stopped here a dozen times over the past 3 years. It was as close to safe as anywhere could be. The pool reflected the sky mirror still, except where the falling water disturbed it. Caleb let Grant drink while he scanned the surrounding terrain. The path they had descended was empty. The ridges above showed no movement. If someone was following, they had either fallen behind or hidden themselves well. Sam knelt beside the pool, splashed cold water on his face. The boy looked exhausted. They had been walking since yesterday afternoon with only a few hours of broken sleep. Rest here for a bit, Caleb said. Then we push on to the valley. He was refilling his canteen when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the rush of falling water. A breath, short, tight, controlled. The sound of someone trying very hard to stay quiet. Caleb's hand moved to his rifle, slowly. No sudden motions. He straightened, turned his head just enough to scan the area behind the waterfall. The curtain of white water obscured the rock face, but there was space back there. A gap between the falling water and the stone, big enough for a person. His finger found the trigger guard. 3 years in the wilderness had taught him that most sounds meant animals, but some sounds meant people, and people were always more dangerous. "Someone there?" His voice carried over the water's roar. Silence. Then barely audible, a woman's voice. Educated, Eastern accent. Terrified. "Don't look at me, please. I need help." Caleb's mind processed the information in seconds. Woman, lone, hiding. Brave but not attacking. Not immediate threat, but scared enough to hide behind a waterfall, which meant something had driven her here. Something bad. He turned away from the waterfall, showing her his back, giving her space. "My name is Caleb Stone," he said to the empty air. "Are you hurt?" A pause, then the words came in a rush, shame and desperation mixed together. "My clothing was taken by the current when I crossed through the thorns. I have nothing to cover myself with." Understanding came immediately. She had been running. Crashed through brush, maybe fell in the creek, lost or tore her clothing. Now she was trapped between modesty and survival. Caleb didn't hesitate. He unbuckled his buckskin coat, the garment he had worn every day for 3 years. It smelled of smoke and sweat and pine sap. It was the only coat he owned. He laid it carefully on a flat rock beside the pool, within reach of someone behind the waterfall. "Coat's here," he said. "Take your time." He walked back to where Sam stood wide-eyed beside Grant. The boy opened his mouth to speak, but Caleb shook his head. "Wait. Watch. Stay ready." Movement behind the waterfall. A figure emerging, slowly wrapped in his coat, clutching the leather tight around her body. She stepped into the light, and Caleb's first thought was that she didn't belong here. She belonged in a drawing room or a church, not in this wild place of stone and water and danger. She was perhaps late 20s, early 30s. Dark hair hung wet against her shoulders and down her back, soaked from the waterfall. Her face was pale, exhausted, marked with small cuts from branches or thorns. Around her neck, hanging outside the coat, was a simple wooden cross on a leather cord. A rosary. She was a nun. Her eyes met his for just a second before she looked away, embarrassed or afraid or both. She held herself upright, despite obvious pain, one foot lifted slightly, weight on the other leg. "Sister," Caleb said, keeping his voice even, non-threatening. "Are you injured?" "My ankle," she said. "I jumped from the rocks when they chased me. I think it's sprained." "Who chased you?" Her face paled further. "Raiders. They attacked our mission group at dawn. 8 of us. I ran. I don't know if anyone else survived." The words hit Caleb like stones. 8 people. A mission group. Probably Eastern missionaries come west to convert the Indians, full of faith and good intentions and absolutely no understanding of how brutal the frontier could be. And now they were likely dead except for this one woman who had been fast enough or lucky enough to escape. "When?" he asked. "Yesterday morning. I've been running since then." 24 hours. She had survived a day and a night alone in the wilderness with no supplies, no shelter, no food. Impressive. Most people would have died from exposure or panic. "I need to look at that ankle," Caleb said. "From where I'm standing, I won't come closer unless you say so." She hesitated, then nodded, shifted her weight and extended her injured leg slightly. Even from 10 feet away, Caleb could see the swelling. The ankle was twice its normal size, bruised deep purple and black. A bad sprain at minimum, possibly a hairline fracture. She wouldn't be running anymore. Walking would be agony. "It's bad," he said, "but you can walk on it if we brace it. You'll be slow." She nodded again, relief and fear fighting for control of her expression. "Thank you. I'm Sister Willa Morgan." "Caleb Stone, that's Sam." Willa's gaze shifted to the boy who had been staring at her with open-mouthed shock. She managed a small smile despite her pain. "Hello, Sam." The boy said nothing, just pressed closer to Grant's side. Strangers scared him. Women strangers scared him more. His mother had been dead over a year, but the memory was still fresh. Sam's with me, Caleb said. I'm looking after him. Something in Willa's eyes shifted. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition that this mountain man with a rifle and a hard face had a soft enough heart to care for an orphan child. The raiders, Caleb said, bringing them back to immediate danger. Do you know which way they went? South, Willa said, but I lost them in the dark. I've been hiding ever since. South, the same direction Caleb and Sam were headed, the same direction someone had been following them from. This was getting complicated fast. Caleb made a decision. There's a cave I know, half a day's walk. We can shelter there while I figure out what to do next. I should go back, Willa said, to the mission site. Someone might have survived. They might need help. They're dead or gone, Caleb said bluntly. Going back is suicide. I took vows, she said, and now there was steel in her voice. To serve others, even at cost to myself. Vows won't stop a bullet. Faith might. They stared at each other across the small space, wills clashing. Caleb recognized the stubbornness in her eyes. She meant what she said. She would walk back into danger because her beliefs demanded it. Listen to me, he said, lowering his voice, making sure she heard every word. I spent 8 years with the Army. I know what raiders do to women they catch. Your faith is admirable. Your survival is possible. Pick one. The blunt cruelty of it shocked her. Good. She needed shock. She needed to understand that this was not Philadelphia or Ohio or wherever she came from. This was the frontier, and the frontier had no mercy for the idealistic. Come with us, Caleb said. Stay alive today. Make bigger decisions tomorrow. Willa looked at Sam, at Grant, at the trail leading north. Finally, she nodded. All right, but we need to move quickly. If they're searching systematically, they'll find this spot eventually. Agreed. Caleb turned to Sam. Get the bandages from my pack. While Sam dug through the supply pack, Caleb found long strips of leather and began fashioning a brace. He had learned basic field medicine during his Army days. Enough to keep men alive until a real doctor could see them. Enough to splint a sprained ankle. This is going to hurt, he warned Willa, but once it's tight, walking will be easier. She sat on a rock, extended her leg. Caleb knelt at a respectful distance, wrapped the leather strips around her ankle and lower calf. His hands were gentle but efficient. He had done this before, many times, for soldiers whose screams he could still hear in quiet moments. Willa hissed through her teeth as he tightened the brace, but didn't cry out. Tough. He respected that. You'll need to lean on a walking stick, he said, and we'll go slower than I'd like. But you'll make it. Thank you, she said again. Don't thank me yet. We're not safe. He cut a strong branch, trimmed it to the right height, and handed it to her. She tested her weight. The brace helped. She could walk, though every step clearly hurt. They set out north, leaving clear waterfalls behind. Caleb took point rifle ready, scanning constantly. Sam walked beside Grant, leading the mule. Willa came last, slower than the rest, but keeping up through sheer determination. The terrain climbed steeply away from the creek, following a ridgeline that offered good sight distance but little cover. Caleb didn't like it. Too exposed. But the cave was still 2 hours away, and they had no choice but to keep moving. After an hour, Willa called for a rest. She lowered herself onto a fallen log, breathing hard, face gray with pain. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cold air. Caleb gave her water from his canteen. She drank gratefully. How much farther? She asked. Another hour, maybe more at this pace. She nodded, gathering herself for the next push. Caleb noticed Sam watching her with something like awe. The boy had seen plenty of hardship, but he recognized strength when he saw it. You're doing good, Caleb told her. Not pity, statement of fact. I don't feel good. Nobody does after running for their life. But you're alive. That counts. They rested 5 minutes, then moved again. The sun climbed toward noon, warming the air slightly. The sky remained that pale blue that meant weather was coming. Caleb gave them maybe 18 hours before the storm hit. They needed to be under cover by then. As they walked, Caleb's mind worked through the problems. Someone had been tracking him. Raiders had attacked Willa's group. Those might be connected or might be separate threats. Either way, their situation had gone from difficult to dangerous. 3 people, 2 of them vulnerable. Limited supplies. winter approaching, and unknown enemies somewhere in these mountains. He had spent 3 years avoiding exactly this kind of complication. 3 years living quiet and alone, taking no responsibility beyond keeping himself and Sam fed. Now he had a nun in his coat and raiders possibly hunting them, and every instinct screamed at him to leave her to take Sam and disappear deeper into the mountains where no one could follow. But he couldn't. The same thing that had destroyed his army career, the same stubborn refusal to abandon people who needed help, wouldn't let him walk away. So he kept moving north toward a cave he hoped was still empty and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The cave entrance was hidden behind a rockfall that looked natural but had been carefully arranged years ago by some long-dead trapper who understood the value of a good bolt hole. Caleb had found it during his first winter in these mountains, used it twice when weather turned lethal. The interior was dry, sheltered from wind with space enough for several people and a small fire that wouldn't be visible from outside. They reached it just after noon. Caleb made Sam and Willa wait while he checked inside. Empty, no signs of recent habitation. He waved them in. The relief on Willa's face when she finally sat down and took weight off her ankle made her look 10 years younger. She leaned back against the stone wall, closed her eyes, and just breathed. Sam stood uncertainly near the entrance until Caleb nodded permission. Then the boy moved to the back of the cave, curled up in a corner, and watched Willa with wary eyes. Caleb built a fire using supplies he had cached here months ago. Dry kindling, flint and steel practiced motions that produced flame within minutes. The smoke drew upward through natural vents in the rock, dispersing before it could signal their location. He set water to boil, added dried meat and wild onions to make a thin stew. Not much, but hot food would help. All of them were running on empty. While the stew cooked, he checked Willa's ankle again. The swelling hadn't increased. Good sign. Probably not broken, just badly sprained. She would need to stay off it for at least 2 days. More if possible. "How long were you running?" he asked. "Since dawn yesterday. I didn't stop except to hide." 24 hours of fear and flight. Most people would have collapsed. Anyone else from your group make it out? Her face crumpled for just a second before she controlled it. "I don't know. The attack was so sudden. Fire gunshots, screaming. I ran. God forgive me, I just ran." "Nothing to forgive," Caleb said. "Staying would have been suicide. I'm supposed to serve, to help others. Instead, I ran. You survived. That's something." She looked at him, then really looked at him as if trying to understand what kind of man would say that. What kind of man would wrap his coat around a stranger and lead her to safety and tell her that survival was enough? "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "You're no ordinary trapper." "Used to be Army. Scout. That was a long time ago." "What happened?" "Made decisions I couldn't take back. Now I'm here." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all he could offer. The rest was too complicated, too painful, wrapped up in things he had spent 3 years trying to forget. Sam stirred in his corner, drawing Willa's attention. "And the boy you're caring for him. His parents are dead. Has nowhere else to go." "That's kind of you." Caleb shook his head. "Not kind, necessary. Nobody else would take him. Because of his blood. Because people are stupid." Willa smiled slightly. "Yes, they are." The stew finished cooking. Caleb served it in tin cups, gave Willa the largest portion. She needed the calories more than he did. Sam ate quickly, hungrily, then curled up again and fell asleep within minutes. Exhaustion finally claiming him. Caleb and Willa sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle and Sam's steady breathing. Outside, wind had picked up. The temperature was dropping. Storm coming sooner than he had thought. "We'll stay here tonight," Caleb said. "Rest. Then tomorrow we figure out next steps." "I should go back to the mission site." "No. Those people were my responsibility. Their dead sister. Accept it." She flinched at his harsh tone, but didn't argue. Maybe she knew he was right. Maybe she just didn't have the strength left to fight. "Why are you helping me?" she asked after a while. Caleb considered the question. He could lie, say it was Christian duty or basic decency, but lying to a nun seemed like adding insult to injury. "Because I've run from enough things in my life," he said finally, "and I'm tired of it." Before Willa could respond, a sound froze them both. Voices, distant but carrying on the wind. men's voices calling to each other. Searching. Caleb was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. He moved to the cave entrance, peered out carefully. Nothing visible yet, but the voices were getting closer. 3 men, maybe 4, spreading out across the ridge. Raiders. Had to be. He turned back to Willa and Sam. The boy was awake now, fear bright in his eyes. "Stay quiet," Caleb whispered. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." He positioned himself just inside the entrance rifle, aimed at the approach path. If they found the cave, he would have maybe 1 shot before they returned fire. After that, it would be brutal and close, and he would probably die. But he might buy Willa and Sam time to run. The voices grew louder, boots crunching on stone. Someone laughed, the sound cruel and careless. "Spread out," a man called. That nun couldn't have gotten far on a busted ankle. They knew about her injury, which meant they had tracked her from the mission site, had been hunting her specifically. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. His heart rate slowed, breathing deepened. Old training kicking in. The calm that came before violence. Boots scuffed rock maybe 30 feet from the cave entrance. A man appeared, rifle slung over his shoulder, not expecting danger. He looked right at the rockfall concealing the cave. Caleb could see his face clearly. Weathered, bearded eyes, flat and dead. A killer's eyes. The man's gaze swept across the rocks. Paused. Moved on. He hadn't seen it. The entrance was too well hidden. "Nothing here," the man called. "Just rocks." "Keep looking," another voice responded. "She's around here somewhere." The searchers moved on, voices fading as they climbed higher up the ridge. Caleb waited, barely breathing, until silence returned. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, he lowered the rifle. Behind him, Willa had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. Sam was shaking. Caleb moved back to them, put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "They're gone," he said quietly, "but they'll be back. They know you're in this area." "Then we have to run," Willa said, "where you can barely walk." "I'll manage." "You'll slow us down and get us all killed." Her face set in stubborn lines. "Then leave me. Take Sam and go." "Not happening. I'm not worth dying for." Caleb met her eyes. "That's not your choice to make." Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was nearly here. Within the hour, rain would come. Heavy rain, the kind that turned trails to mud and creeks to torrents. Dangerous conditions, but also opportunity. Rain would wash away tracks, reduce visibility, send smart men seeking shelter. An idea formed in Caleb's mind. Dangerous, but less dangerous than staying here. "There's another cache," he said, 2 miles north. "Farther from where they're searching. We move now during the storm. They won't see us. They won't track us." "That's insane," Willa said. "In this weather, insane is staying here waiting for them to come back." She looked at Sam, at the cave entrance, at the darkening sky visible through the opening. Fear and faith warring in her expression. "All right," she said finally. "We run." They gathered what little gear they had. Caleb helped Willa to her feet, steadied her as she tested the injured ankle. She bit her lip against the pain, but stayed upright. The first drops of rain began to fall as they left the cave. Within minutes, it became a downpour, cold and relentless, turning the world to gray. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. Perfect. Caleb led them north, moving as fast as Willa could manage. She leaned heavily on her walking stick, jaw clenched, every step clearly agony. But she kept moving. Sam came behind, leading Grant. The mule's hooves slipped on wet rock, but the animal was sure-footed, bred for mountain work. They had gone maybe a mile when voices echoed through the rain behind them. The raiders returning to search the area again. Closer this time. "Faster," Caleb urged. "I'm trying," Willa gasped. A shout. Someone had seen them, barely visible through the rain, 3 figures on horseback. Not close, but closing fast. "Run!" Caleb snapped. They scrambled up a steep slope, boots sliding in mud, hands grasping at brush and rock for purchase. Behind them, the riders spurred their horses forward. The ridge above them. If they could reach it, they could descend the far side, lose their pursuers in the storm. 30 yards. 20. Willa stumbled, nearly fell. Caleb caught her, half-dragged her forward. A gunshot cracked through the rain. The bullet hit stone near Caleb's head, spraying rock fragments. Warning shot or bad aim. Either way, they were out of time. They crested the ridge and Caleb looked back. 3 riders spread out, weapons drawn. The lead rider raised his rifle. "Give us the woman, mountain man," he shouted over the storm. "No reason for you to die today." Caleb raised his own rifle sighted on the man's chest. 50 yards uphill in heavy rain. Difficult shot, but not impossible. "Ride off," Caleb called back. "Only warning you'll get." The rider laughed. "You're outnumbered, outgunned. Be smart." Behind Caleb, Willa struggled to her feet. Despite everything, despite the fear and pain and exhaustion, she straightened her spine and spoke. "I'll go with them. Don't die for me." "Get behind that rock," Caleb said without looking at her. "Now." "Caleb, move." The steel in his voice left no room for argument. Willa limped behind a boulder, pulling Sam with her. Grant followed, sensing danger. The three riders moved forward confident. They had the numbers. They had the high ground. They had victory within reach. Then the storm broke fully. Thunder crashed directly overhead, so loud it physically hurt. Lightning struck the ridge behind the riders, illuminating everything in stark white light for one frozen second. And in that second, with rain hammering down and thunder still echoing, Caleb made his choice. He fired, not at the riders, but at the ground in front of their horses. The animals reared, panicked by the gunshot and lightning. One rider fell, hitting the ground hard. The others fought to control their mounts. "Run!" Caleb shouted to Willa and Sam. They ran. Down the far slope, sliding more than walking, the storm concealing them. Behind angry voices and more gunshots, but firing blind now. The riders couldn't see them through the rain and chaos. Caleb kept them moving north, using terrain he knew, avoiding open ground. The storm raged around them, turning the world to water and wind. Within 20 minutes, they had put distance between themselves and pursuit. Within an hour, they had vanished completely into the wilderness. They found shelter finally under an overhanging rock ledge, barely wide enough for the three of them and Grant. Soaked, freezing, terrified, but alive. Sam shivered violently despite being wrapped in a blanket. Willa's face had gone gray, her ankle twice its normal size from the run. Caleb checked them both, made sure hypothermia wasn't setting in. They would survive. For now. "Thank you," Willa said through chattering teeth. "You didn't have to risk yourself." Caleb looked at her. At this nun who had survived a day and a night alone and then run through a storm on a broken ankle because the alternative was worse. At Sam, trembling with cold and fear, but trusting that Caleb would keep him safe. At the rifle in his hands, in the endless mountains around them, and the storm that showed no signs of stopping. "Yes," he said quietly, "I did." The storm raged through the night. They huddled together for warmth, too cold and wet to sleep, listening to wind howl and rain hammer the rocks above them. Somewhere in that darkness, raiders searched. Somewhere danger waited. But for now, in this small space of stone and storm, they had survived. And survival, Caleb had learned, was sometimes enough. Dawn came pale and cold to the mountain shelter. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the world washed clean and dripping. Caleb woke to gray light and the sound of water falling from rocks, each drop a tiny percussion marking time. He had slept perhaps 3 hours, his body trained by years of wilderness living to rest in shifts, one part of his mind always alert for danger. Sam lay curled against his side, still deeply asleep, exhausted by yesterday's terror and flight. On the other side of the small shelter, Willa sat with her back against stone, her eyes open and distant. She hadn't slept at all. Caleb could see it in the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself rigid, as if relaxing might break something inside her. He understood. After violence, after running for your life, sleep felt like surrender. Like letting your guard down when enemies might still be hunting. "How's the ankle?" he asked quietly, not wanting to wake Sam. Willa looked down at her injured leg as if surprised to find it still attached. "Painful, but I can walk." "Walking and running are different things." "I know." Caleb crawled out from under the overhang, stood stretched, muscles stiff from cold and inactivity. The world beyond their shelter looked different in daylight, less threatening. The storm had transformed the landscape, turning dust to mud, filling every depression with water, which meant tracking would be difficult. Good for them, frustrating for anyone searching. He climbed a small rise to get perspective, scanning in all directions. No smoke, no movement, no signs of riders or camps. The raiders had either given up or moved their search elsewhere, or they were smart enough to stay hidden. When he returned, Willa had managed to stand, testing her weight on the injured ankle. Her face showed the cost, but she remained upright. We need to keep moving, Caleb said. Put distance between us and anyone searching. Where north, I have a cabin 2 days from here. Defensible position, supplies. We can rest there, figure out what comes next. Willa nodded slowly. And the raiders? Will they follow that far? Depends how badly they want you. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. This wasn't random violence. The raiders had tracked her, specifically knew about her injury, were organized in their search. Someone wanted her captured. The question was why. They gathered their minimal gear, loaded Grant, and set out as the sun cleared the eastern peaks. The mule picked his way carefully over wet rocks, steady despite the difficult terrain. Sam walked close to the animal, one hand on the pack frame, drawing comfort from the familiar presence. Caleb set a hard pace despite Willa's injury. Every minute in the open was a minute at risk. The trail climbed steeply through pine forest, following a ridgeline that offered good visibility but little cover. Not ideal, but the fastest route north. Willa struggled. Within the first hour, sweat beaded on her face despite the cold air. She leaned heavily on her walking stick, each step a visible effort. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to slow down, just kept moving with grim determination. After 2 hours, Caleb called a halt. They had reached a small clearing where runoff from the storm had created a temporary stream. Good place to rest and refill canteens. Sam dropped beside a tree, breathing hard. The boy was tough for 7 years old, but he wasn't built for this kind of forced march. Willa lowered herself more carefully, extending her injured leg, closing her eyes for a moment. Caleb knelt beside the stream-filled canteens, drank deeply. The water tasted of stone and pine, cold enough to hurt his teeth. Clean, pure. One of the few reliable things in this uncertain world. How much farther? Willa asked, accepting the canteen he offered. 6 more hours to the cabin, maybe 8 at this pace. I'll go faster. You'll go the speed you can manage. Pushing too hard will make the injury worse. She drank, handed back the canteen, met his eyes with surprising directness. You know a lot about injuries. Army teaches you, or you learn fast. You were a soldier, scout, tracked for cavalry patrols, found water, found trails, found hostiles before they found us. He paused. Usually. The word carried weight. Usually meant sometimes he failed, sometimes people died. Willa heard it but didn't push. She was learning when to ask questions and when to let silence speak. While Willa rested, Caleb checked their back trail. No movement, no dust. The storm had bought them time, but time was temporary. Eventually the raiders would pick up their trail again. Eventually pursuit would resume. He returned to find Sam sitting close to Willa, showing her something in his hand. A small stone quartz, maybe catching the light. The boy spoke quietly, explaining something about how to identify different rock types. Willa listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Sam's face light up with the pleasure of teaching. Caleb watched them for a moment, something uncomfortable shifting in his chest. The boy had barely spoken to anyone except Caleb in over a year. Now here he was, talking easily with a nun he had known for less than a day. Trust given freely. Children saw what adults missed. They moved out after 15 minutes. The trail descended now, following a creek drainage toward lower elevations. Easier walking, but more exposed. Anyone on the ridges above could see them clearly. Willa's gait had deteriorated. She limped badly, each step producing a barely audible intake of breath. Pain. Caleb had heard that sound before in field hospitals and after battles. The sound of someone pushing past their body's limits. You need to ride, he said. Grant's carrying supplies. Grant can carry you and supplies. Mules are stronger than they look. I'm fine walking. You're not fine. You're hurting yourself. Willa stopped, turned to face him. I won't be a burden. I won't slow you down more than I already am. It's not about being a burden. It's about being smart. You ride. We move faster. Everyone benefits. She wavered, pride fighting practicality. Finally, practicality won. Caleb helped her onto Grant's back, positioning her so the supply packs didn't dig into her legs. The mule accepted the additional weight with only a disgruntled snort. Sam walked beside them, one hand resting on Grant's neck, clearly pleased to have Willa closer. They made better time after that. By afternoon, they had covered another 4 miles, putting significant distance between themselves and the previous night's shelter. The terrain opened into a broad valley dotted with aspen groves, their leaves already turning gold with approaching autumn. Sam walked ahead now, scouting as Caleb had taught him. The boy moved quietly, stopping frequently to listen and look. At 7 years old, he already possessed instincts that would keep him alive where more experienced but less careful men would die. You've trained him well, Willa observed. Not trained, taught. There's a difference, or these. What difference? Training makes you obey. Teaching makes you understand. Willa considered that. You sound like a teacher. I sound like someone who's seen what happens when soldiers obey without understanding. The bitterness in his voice surprised them both. Caleb hadn't meant to reveal that much. 3 years he had spent not talking about his army service, not thinking about the decisions that had ended his career. Now, with this nun watching him, with those two perceptive eyes, his control was slipping. What happened? Willa asked quietly. Nothing worth discussing. I think it is. I think whatever happened made you who you are now. And who am I now? A good man trying to believe he isn't. The words hit harder than any accusation. Caleb turned away, scanning the valley ahead, looking for anything except her face. They rode in silence for a while. The sun angled lower shadows lengthening across the valley floor. Another 2 hours until dark. They would have to push hard to reach the cabin before nightfall. Sam returned from his forward position, moving fast, face tight with worry. People, he said quietly. 2. Hiding in rocks ahead. Caleb's hand went to his rifle. How far? Maybe quarter-mile, near the big boulder pile. Armed. Didn't see weapons, but they're scared. Scared people could be more dangerous than armed enemies. Scared people made bad decisions. Caleb weighed options. Bypass the rocks at an hour to their journey, or investigate risk encounter but maybe gain information. Stay here, he told Willa and Sam. If shooting starts, you run north. Don't wait for me. Caleb, Willa began, not discussing it. You run. Understand? She nodded reluctantly. Caleb moved forward alone, rifle ready, using cover, approaching the boulder pile from an angle that gave him advantage. As he got closer, he heard voices. Women's voices. Praying. He circled to where he could see them without being seen. 2 figures huddled in a gap between boulders. One elderly, gray-haired, wearing the remnants of a nun's habit. One younger, maybe early 20s, rocking back and forth, eyes vacant with shock. Missionaries. From Willa's group. Caleb lowered his rifle slightly, but kept it ready. Don't move. Don't scream. I'm not here to hurt you. The elderly nun gasped, started to rise. Caleb held up one hand. Caleb Stone. I'm with Sister Willa Morgan. She survived the raid. The elderly nun's face crumpled with relief and grief mixed together. Willa's alive. God be praised. We thought everyone was dead. Not everyone. How many of you made it out? Just us, Mother Theodora and Sister Felicity. The others, her voice broke. The others fell. Caleb called back to Sam. Within minutes, Willa arrived, moving as fast as her injury allowed. When she saw the 2 survivors, she cried out, stumbled forward, embraced Mother Theodora with desperate relief. The older woman held her, both of them weeping. Sam hung back, uncomfortable with the emotional display. Caleb understood. Strong feelings scared the boy, too much like the grief he had buried when his own parents died. Sister Felicity didn't respond to Willa's presence. The young nun sat with her back against stone, staring at nothing, lips moving in silent repetition of some prayer or plea. Whatever she had seen during the raid had broken something inside her. We need to move, Caleb said, giving them a moment but not longer. This area isn't safe. Mother Theodora pulled back from Willa, wiping her eyes, reasserting control. She was perhaps 65, gray-haired and stern-faced, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Who is this man? She asked Willa, looking at Caleb with suspicion. He saved my life, twice now. A mountain man. A good man. Mother Theodora's expression suggested she considered those things mutually exclusive. We should go to Fort Collins. Report the raid to authorities. Fort Collins is 3 days south, Caleb said. Through territory where raiders are still searching. My cabin is 6 hours north. Food shelter, defensible position. We go there first. I don't take orders from mountain men. Then you'll die out here, your choice. The bluntness shocked her. Willa stepped between them. Mother Theodora, please. Caleb knows this country. We should trust his judgment. Trust a man we just met. A man who risked his life for me. Yes. Mother Theodora looked at Willa, really looked at her, and something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition that the young sister she thought she knew had changed. Very well, she said finally. We'll go to this cabin, but only until we can reach proper authorities. They set out again now, 5 people in 1 mule. Mother Theodora walked with rigid dignity despite exhaustion. Sister Felicity moved mechanically, guided by Willa's gentle hand. Sam stayed close to Caleb, clearly disturbed by the addition of more people to their group. The cabin wasn't much to look at. A single room built from logs chinked with mud and moss, roof covered in split shingles. Windows were small and shuttered. One door solid and reinforced. It sat in a natural clearing with good sight lines in all directions and a stream running nearby. But to Caleb, it was home. The only real home he had known since leaving the army 3 years ago. They arrived just as the sun touched the western peaks light, turning everything gold and orange. Caleb checked the cabin thoroughly before allowing anyone inside. Empty, undisturbed. His supplies were exactly where he had left them. Inside was cramped with 5 people, a single room maybe 15 feet square, a stone fireplace at one end, sleeping area at the other, table and chairs in between, not built for comfort, built for survival. Mother Theodora looked around with barely concealed disdain. This is where you live. This is where I survive, Caleb corrected. He built a fire while Willa helped Felicity settle on the single cot. Sam began unpacking essential supplies from Grant. Mother Theodora stood near the door, clearly uncomfortable, clutching her damaged habit around her. There's a creek 20 yards south, Caleb told her. Fresh water. Clean yourself if you want, but stay within sight of the cabin. I hardly need a mountain man telling me about hygiene. I need you alive. Dead people are harder to protect. She bristled but said nothing. After a moment, she walked out, moving with stiff dignity. Willa caught Caleb's eye, something like apology in her expression. He shrugged. He didn't need the old nun to like him, just needed her to follow orders and stay alive. She's scared, Willa said quietly. She hides it with anger. I know. Seen it before. Fear makes people mean. He set water to boil, started preparing a meal from his stored supplies. Dried beans, some preserved venison, wild onions. Simple food but nourishing. With 5 people eating, his supplies would only last a week. Another problem to solve. Sam helped, working silently beside Caleb. The boy had been quiet since finding the 2 nuns. Too many people, too much change, too much reminder of the world beyond their isolated existence. You okay? Caleb asked him. Sam nodded but didn't meet his eyes. Not okay then. Caleb put a hand on the boy's shoulder, squeezed gently. Later, when the others were asleep, they would talk. For now, Sam just needed to know Caleb was there. Mother Theodora returned as the meal finished cooking. She had washed her face and hands, tried to restore some order to her damaged habit. She looked ancient and exhausted, every year of her age showing. They ate in near silence. Felicity had to be coaxed to swallow each bite. Mother Theodora ate mechanically without pleasure. Willa ate with obvious hunger despite her pain. Sam ate quickly and retreated to a corner. After the meal, as darkness settled outside, Mother Theodora finally spoke to Caleb directly. Mr. Stone, I want to thank you for providing shelter. However, I must insist that Sister Willa sleeps separately from you and the boy. Caleb looked around the single room. Where exactly do you suggest? There must be some accommodation for propriety. There's a cabin. Take it or leave it. Sir, these women have taken vows. There are rules about such things. Rules don't matter much when you're dead. Willa intervened again. Mother, please. Caleb has behaved with perfect honor. There's no impropriety. You've been alone with him for 2 nights. Because he saved my life. Mother Theodora's face hardened. The order has expectations. Standards must be maintained. The order isn't here, Willa said, and her voice carried an edge Caleb hadn't heard before. We are, and we're alive because of him. The 2 women stared at each other across the small cabin. Battle of wills. Mother Theodora clearly expected obedience. Willa just as clearly was done obeying without question. Finally, Mother Theodora looked away. Very well, but I will be watching. Watch all you want, Caleb said, as long as you follow orders that keep you alive. The evening settled into uneasy quiet. Mother Theodora led Felicity in prayers. The young nun's lips moved, but her eyes remained vacant, staring at something no one else could see. Whatever horrors she had witnessed during the raid, they played on endless repeat behind her eyes. Caleb stepped outside to check the perimeter. The night was clear and cold stars brilliant overhead. No moon yet, darkness thick enough to hide in. He walked the cabin's boundary, checking sight lines, identifying approaches an enemy might use. Footsteps behind him. Willa limping slightly, carrying a blanket around her shoulders against the cold. "You should rest," Caleb said. "So should you, but neither of us will." True enough, he turned back to scanning the darkness. "Mother Theodora doesn't mean to be difficult," Willa said. "She's frightened. Everything she believed about God's protection has been shattered. Faith is a luxury. Survival is necessity. You don't believe in anything." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I believe in keeping people alive. That's about as close to religion as I get. That's more faith than you think." He glanced at her. In the starlight, her face was pale and serious. The wooden cross at her neck caught a gleam of light. "You still believe?" he asked. "After everything?" "I'm still figuring that out. What I believed before and what I believe now aren't the same thing." "What changed?" "You did. Sam did. Surviving did." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I spent 7 years in missions teaching that God protects the faithful. Then I watched faithful people die while I ran. Now I'm standing here with a man who claims no faith but acts with more honor than most believers I know. Don't make me something I'm not." "I'm not. I'm just seeing what's really there." Before Caleb could respond, a sound froze them both. Hoofbeats, distant but distinct, multiple horses moving fast. Caleb had Willa inside within seconds. He grabbed his rifle, positioned himself by the shuttered window. "Everyone quiet," he said. Sam snuffed the lamp. Darkness filled the cabin. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder, coming closer. Caleb counted. 3 horses, maybe 4. They rode into the clearing and stopped. For a long moment, nothing. Then a voice called out. Familiar, educated, mocking. "Caleb Stone, I know you're in there." Caleb's blood ran cold. He knew that voice, hadn't heard it in 3 years, but he knew it. Ezra Pike. "We need to talk, Caleb," Pike called. "Come on out. Nobody needs to die tonight." Caleb didn't move, didn't respond. Assessing. Pike had brought 3 men with him, 4 total. Not overwhelming numbers, but enough to be dangerous. "I'm counting to 10, Pike said. "Then we come in. And trust me, that'll be messy." "Who is that?" Mother Theodora whispered. "Someone I used to know," Caleb said. "Everyone stay down. Stay quiet." 1, Pike counted. Caleb's mind raced. The cabin was defensible, but not against determined assault. Windows could be forced. Door could be burned. If Pike wanted in, he would get in eventually. 2, but Pike had called his name. Knew he was here, which meant this wasn't random. Wasn't about the nuns, at least not entirely. 3, this was about him, about his past, about something unfinished from 3 years ago. 4, Caleb made his decision. He stood, moved to the door, called out, "Pike, just you, leave your guns, we talk." Silence, then, "Now why would I do that?" "Because if you tried to force entry, first man through the door dies. Might be you, might be one of your men. You willing to bet which?" More silence. Pike was calculating. He had numbers, but Caleb had position and desperation. Desperate men were dangerous. "All right," Pike said finally. "Just talk. But Caleb, you need to hear what I'm offering." "I'm listening. Not like this, face to face." Against every instinct, Caleb opened the cabin door, stepped out into the darkness, rifle ready. Pike stood 30 feet away, hands visible, no weapon drawn. In the starlight, Caleb could see he hadn't changed much. Still lean, still cold-eyed, still wearing that faint smirk that had always made Caleb want to hit him. "Been a long time," Pike said. "Not long enough. What do you want?" "Working for a man named Judd Crow, land speculator. He wants those mission nuns gone from the valley south of here. Wants the land they're sitting on." "So you killed 5 people." "That wasn't the plan. My boys got overzealous. But here we are." "Here we are," Caleb repeated. "And you tracked the survivors to my cabin because I know you, Caleb. Know you can't help playing hero. Figured you'd picked up the nun who got away. Pike shrugged. Wasn't wrong. Get to your offer. $500. You hand over the women, I forget I saw you. Crow gets his land, you get enough money to disappear proper. Plus I testify at your court-martial hearing. Tell them I lied. Clear your name with the army. The offer hung in the cold air. $500 was a fortune. Army pardoning him meant he could return to civilization, get honest work, give Sam a real future instead of this hard-scrabble existence. All he had to do was betray 3 women who trusted him. No, Caleb said. Don't be stupid. You're a wanted man with a bounty. I could collect that instead. Take the women, you get nothing. You could try to. I got 12 men, Caleb. You got a cabin and hope. Those aren't good odds. I've survived worse odds. Pike's expression hardened. Think about the booty. Sam, right? That's his name. Think about what's best for him. Mentioning Sam was a mistake. Caleb's hand tightened on the rifle. You've got 10 seconds to ride off, he said quietly. Use them. I'm giving you a way out. I don't want it. Then you're a fool. Probably, but I'm a fool who's keeping his honor. Pike stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled cold and humorless. All right, Caleb, all right. I'll give you 24 hours. Think it over. Come morning, if you haven't changed your mind, I'm coming with all 12 men, and we'll burn you out if we have to. He mounted his horse, the others following suit. 24 hours, Pike called as they rode away. Be smart for once in your life. The hoofbeats faded into darkness. Caleb stayed outside, watching until silence returned. Only then did he go back inside. 4 faces stared at him in the dim light. Mother Theodora looked terrified. Felicity remained blank. Sam's eyes were wide with fear, and Willa watched him with an expression he couldn't read. What was that about? Mother Theodora demanded. Someone I knew in the army, Sergeant Ezra Pike. He's the one organized the raid on your mission. Why, land speculator hired him, wants your valley. You wouldn't sell, so he tried to scare you away. By killing us. That part wasn't planned, apparently, but it doesn't matter. What matters is Pike's given us 24 hours before he comes back with more men. We have to run, Mother Theodora said. Where Pike knows this country, he'll track us. Then we fight. 4 people against 12, we'd lose. Then what do we do? Caleb looked around the small cabin, at Sam terrified, at Felicity broken, at Mother Theodora desperate, at Willa watching him with absolute trust. We prepare, he said finally. We turn this cabin into a fortress. And when Pike comes tomorrow, we make him regret it. The night passed in frantic work. Caleb showed Sam how to reinforce the door with additional planks, how to cut firing ports in the shutters, how to position water barrels for fighting fires. Basic military defense adapted for civilian circumstances. Mother Theodora helped despite her age carrying wood-filling containers. The work seemed to steady her, give her purpose beyond fear. Felicity remained catatonic. Willa stayed with her, speaking quietly, holding her hand. By midnight, they had done everything possible. The cabin wouldn't stop a determined assault, but it would make Pike pay a price for entry. Maybe high enough that he would reconsider. Maybe. Caleb sent everyone except Sam to sleep. He and the boy would take first watch. Later, Willa could relieve them. They sat in darkness, listening to the night. After an hour, Sam spoke quietly. Caleb, are we going to die? Honest question. Deserved honest answer. I don't know, maybe. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you alert, makes you careful. Are you scared? Caleb thought about lying, decided against it. Yes, but scared doesn't mean helpless. We're prepared. We're ready. That counts for something. Sam leaned against his side. I don't want to lose you like I lost Ma and Pa. The words cut deep. Caleb put his arm around the boy's thin shoulders. I'm going to try very hard not to die, he said. That's all I can promise. They sat together in silence. Outside wind moved through the pines, normal night sounds. But tomorrow would bring violence and blood, and Caleb wasn't sure if his promise to Sam was something he could keep. Around 3 in the morning, Willa relieved them. She carried a rifle now, the one Caleb had given her earlier. She held it awkwardly, but her hands were steady. Think you can use that? Caleb asked. I shot that raider yesterday. I can do it again if I have to. It doesn't get easier. I know. She met his eyes. but neither does dying. Caleb settled Sam in a corner wrapped in blankets. The boy fell asleep immediately, exhaustion claiming him. Children could sleep anywhere even before battle. Caleb should have slept too, but his mind wouldn't quiet. Too many variables, too many ways this could go wrong. You offered us safety, Willa said quietly. But it's cost you everything, hasn't it? Pike wouldn't be here if not for us. Pike would have found me eventually. Don't lie to make me feel better. This is my fault. It's Pike's fault, and Crow's, and every man who thinks women are things to be bought and sold. Willa looked at the rifle in her hands. I spent 7 years believing God would protect the righteous. That faith was shield enough. I was wrong. You're not wrong. You're just learning that faith and fighting aren't at opposites. She smiled slightly. Is that what you believe? I believe you're stronger than you think. I believe you'll survive this. I believe... He stopped. What? I believe you're the bravest person I've met, and that counts for more than prayers ever could. The words hung between them, too honest, too raw, but true. Willa set down the rifle and moved closer. Close enough that he could see the wooden cross at her neck. The determination in her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands that showed her fear was real but wouldn't stop her. When this is over, she said quietly, if we survive, I need to tell you something. Tell me now. No, after, because I need there to be an after. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then returned to the window, resuming watch. Caleb lay down near Sam, but didn't sleep. Just listened to Willa's breathing, the boy's soft snores, the wind outside, and waited for dawn. When the sun finally broke over the eastern peaks, it revealed 12 riders approaching across the meadow. Pike in the lead, all armed, all ready for violence. Caleb woke everyone. It's time. Mother Theodora gathered Felicity close praying. Sam loaded rifles with shaking hands. Willa took position by a window weapon ready. Pike stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Last chance, Caleb, send out the women. Come take them, Caleb shouted back. Your choice. Pike raised his arm. The riders began to spread out, surrounding the cabin. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. Do or die. Probably die. He glanced at Sam, at Willa, at the two nuns praying in the corner. This wasn't how he thought his life would end, but it wasn't the worst way either. Then from the south, a sound that changed everything. A bugle call, military, sharp and clear in the cold morning air. The riders froze. Caleb looked past them to see blue uniforms cresting the ridge. Cavalry, maybe 20 soldiers riding hard. Pike cursed viciously. His men scattered, some fleeing, some trying to stand ground. Too late. The cavalry was on them, weapons drawn, surrounding the raiders with professional efficiency. An officer rode forward, young lieutenant, maybe 30. He looked between Pike and the cabin, assessing the situation. I'm Lieutenant Amos Brennan, 7th Cavalry, he called. Everyone lower your weapons. Pike started to protest. The lieutenant cut him off. You're under arrest for assault and attempted murder. Men secure these prisoners. As soldiers moved to disarm the raiders, Caleb stepped out of the cabin, still holding his rifle but pointed at the ground. The lieutenant turned toward him, and their eyes met. Recognition flashed across Brennan's face. Captain Stone? Not captain. Haven't been for 3 years. Sir, Brennan trailed off, clearly struggling with what to say. Caleb understood. Brennan had been there. At the court-martial, young lieutenant, fresh out of West Point, watching as they destroyed Caleb's career, and said nothing. Pike laughed from where soldiers held him. That's right, Lieutenant. That's Caleb Stone, wanted deserter, bounty on his head. Do your duty and arrest him. Brennan looked at Pike, then back at Caleb. Decision played across his face. Sergeant Pike, Brennan said slowly, you're under arrest for perjury at a court-martial hearing, for false testimony that led to wrongful discharge of an officer. Pike's smile died. What? I was there, Pike. I watched you lie. I stayed silent because I was scared for my career. Brennan straightened in his saddle. I'm not scared anymore. I'm testifying to the truth. Everything you said about Captain Stone at that court-martial was false, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. The world seemed to stop. Caleb stood frozen, unable to process what he was hearing. Your discharge was overturned 6 weeks ago, Brennan continued. New investigation. Ute chief gave testimony, said you prevented a massacre, saved women and children. Army cleared you completely. You're not wanted, sir. You never should have been. 3 years. 3 years of running, hiding, believing he was worthless and guilty and deserving of exile. 3 years of that weight around his neck. And it had been lies. All of it. Lies. Caleb's knees wanted to give out. His hands shook. Sam appeared at his side, small hand gripping his. "Caleb," the boy whispered. "You okay?" "Yeah," Caleb managed. "Yeah, I'm okay." Soldiers secured Pike and his men. Brennan dismounted, approached Caleb slowly. "Sir, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up 3 years ago. I was a coward." "You're speaking now," Caleb said. "That's what matters." They stood awkwardly for a moment. Then Brennan saluted. Caleb, surprised, returned it. Behind them, Willa emerged from the cabin, supporting Mother Theodora. Both women looked stunned by the sudden reversal of fortune. "These are the mission survivors," Brennan asked. "3 of them. 5 others died in the raid. We'll escort them to Fort Collins, ensure their safety." Brennan paused. "You should come too, sir. Clear this up officially. Get your name restored." Caleb looked at the cabin, at Sam, at Willa, at this life he had built in the wilderness, hard and lonely, but his. "Maybe," he said, "maybe not." Because even though his name was cleared, even though he could return to civilization, Caleb wasn't sure that's what he wanted anymore. Sometimes he had learned freedom wasn't about where you could go, it was about choosing to stay. The afternoon sun hung low over the cabin clearing, turning everything copper and gold. Lieutenant Brennan had set up a temporary command post, soldiers tending horses, prisoners secured under guard. Pike sat with his hands bound, face twisted in impotent rage. His men had scattered during the initial confrontation. Most were caught. Those who escaped would be hunted. Caleb stood apart from the military efficiency, watching, but not part of it anymore. 3 years ago, this would have been his world. Orders and discipline and the rigid structure of Army life. Now it felt foreign, like watching a play performed in a language he had once spoken fluently but had since forgotten. Sam pressed close to his side, overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of so many strangers. The boy's hand gripped Caleb's belt anchor in chaos. Willa stood nearby, still holding the rifle, though the immediate danger had passed. Mother Theodora and Felicity remained in the cabin doorway, uncertain whether safety had truly arrived, or if this was just another form of threat. Brennan approached, carrying a leather document case. "Sir, I need to explain some things, if you have a moment." Caleb nodded. They walked a short distance from the others, Sam trailing like a shadow. "The court-martial review happened in August," Brennan began. "New commanding officer Colonel Harrison took over the district. He had a reputation for fairness. When he read through old cases, yours caught his attention. Too many inconsistencies. Pike's testimony didn't match physical evidence or witness accounts. Why didn't anyone notice that 3 years ago? Because Pike was convincing. And because the colonel who presided over your trial wanted a scapegoat. The raid went bad, settlers died, he needed someone to blame. You were convenient." Caleb absorbed this. 3 years of his life destroyed because one man needed to cover his failures and another was willing to lie. "Harrison interviewed everyone who was there that day," Brennan continued, "including me. I told him the truth, that Pike lied, that you refused an illegal order to fire on fleeing women and children, that you physically stopped the captain from committing murder. You could have told the truth 3 years ago." "I know." Brennan's face showed genuine shame. "I was 24, fresh from the academy, scared that speaking up would end my career before it started. It's not an excuse, it's just the truth." "Why speak up now?" "Because I've spent 3 years watching good men die while cowards prospered. Because I couldn't live with myself anymore." Brennan met his eyes. "Because you deserve better." Caleb looked at Sam, at the boy who had become his responsibility, his purpose, his reason for staying alive. "The pardon, it's official. Completely, your discharge was upgraded to honorable medical reasons. Combat trauma. You're entitled to back pay, pension, all of it." Brennan pulled papers from the case. "This is your official reinstatement documentation. You're cleared. No charges. No warrant. Free man. Free." The word felt strange. Caleb had spent so long running that he had forgotten what it meant to stop. "There's more," Brennan said. "The Army wants you back, scout position, honest pay. Colonel Harrison specifically requested you." The offer hung in the air. regular wages, respectability, a future that didn't involve scraping by on trap lines and hope. Everything Caleb had lost handed back. But it also meant leaving, meant returning to a world he no longer fit, meant abandoning this hard-won peace for someone else's war. I appreciate the offer, Caleb said slowly. But no, I'm exactly where I belong. Brennan looked surprised. Sir, this is a chance to reclaim your career. I don't want that career anymore. Then what do you want? Caleb looked at the cabin at Willa still standing guard at Sam pressed against his side. This, what I have right now, that's enough. Brennan studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I understand, sir, more than you might think. They returned to the main group. Mother Theodora intercepted them immediately. Lieutenant, what happens now? We escort you to Fort Collins, Brennan said. You'll give statements about the raid. Pike and his men will face trial. The land speculator who hired them, Judd Crow, will be investigated. And the mission are land rights protected by law. Crow can't touch them. Brennan paused. Though I imagine after everything that's happened, you might not want to return there. Mother Theodora's face showed her struggle. The mission had been her life's work. 7 years building something she believed mattered. Now it was a graveyard and a reminder of failure. We'll discuss it in Fort Collins, she said finally, with proper church authorities. Brennan turned to Willa. Sister, you'll come with us as well. Willa looked at Caleb. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. A question and an answer. No, Willa said. I'm staying here. Mother Theodora's head snapped around. What? I'm not returning to the Order, Mother. I'm sorry, but I've made my choice. This is insanity. You're throwing away your vows for a man. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm choosing something different. Life. Freedom. Myself. You're choosing sin. Willa's voice remained steady despite the accusation. I'm choosing love, and I don't believe God condemns that. Mother Theodora looked like she had been struck. You're abandoning everything we taught you. You taught me to serve, to give myself to others, to find purpose in faith. Willa smiled slightly. I'm doing all of that, just not the way you expected. Sister Willa, I'm ordering you to come with us. You have no authority over me anymore. I release myself from my vows, freely, completely. The words fell like stones into deep water. Mother Theodora's face cycled through shock, anger, disappointment, and finally something like grief. She had lost so much already. Losing Willa felt like the final blow. You'll regret this, she said quietly. Maybe, but it'll be my regret, my choice, mine. Mother Theodora turned away, unable or unwilling to continue the conversation. Sister Felicity, still vacant-eyed, seemed not to have heard any of it. Brennan cleared his throat. Sir, there's another matter, the boy. Sam tensed. Caleb's hand moved to the boy's shoulder, protective. What about him? He's mixed blood, no papers. Technically a ward of the Indian Bureau. They'll want custody over my dead body. I'm not trying to take him, sir. I'm trying to help. Brennan pulled more papers from his case. I have a clerk who can draw up adoption documents, legal guardianship, make the boy officially yours. That puts him beyond the Bureau's reach. Caleb looked down at Sam. The boy stared up at him with those dark eyes that held too much pain for 7 years old. Sam, Caleb said quietly, you want that? Want to be Samuel Stone officially? You mean it? Sam's voice was barely a whisper. For real. For real, if you want it. Sam threw his arms around Caleb's waist, holding tight. The boy was shaking, not from fear this time, from relief, from finally having something solid and permanent in a world that had taken everything else. I want it, Sam said into Caleb's shirt. Please. The paperwork took an hour. Brennan's clerk, a serious young corporal named Hayes, wrote everything out in careful script. Caleb signed. Brennan and 2 other soldiers witnessed. And just like that, Samuel Stone became real, legal, protected. Sam studied the document like it was a treasure map, tracing his new name with one finger. Samuel Thornton Stone, he read aloud, testing how it sounded. Your father's name was Thornton, Caleb explained. Thought you should carry it. Sam looked up with tears in his eyes, but smiling. The first real smile Caleb had seen from the boy in over a year. By late afternoon, the soldiers were ready to move out. Pike and his men would be transported to Fort Collins under heavy guard. Mother Theodora and Felicity would travel with the military escort protected and provided for. Mother Theodora approached Willa one last time. I'm giving you a final chance to reconsider. I've considered everything, Mother. My decision stands. Then I'll pray for your soul. Thank you. I'll pray for yours as well. They embraced briefly awkwardly. Whatever relationship they had once shared was damaged beyond repair, not destroyed, just changed into something neither quite recognized. Sister Felicity surprised everyone by speaking her first words in days. She looked at Willa with sudden clarity. You're braver than I am, she said, voice rusty from disuse. I hope you find what you're looking for. Then she retreated back into silence, but the moment had been real. A blessing, perhaps, or just recognition of truth. The column rode out as the sun touched the western peaks. Caleb, Willa, and Sam stood watching until the soldiers disappeared into the forest. Then they were alone again. The three of them and Grant in the quiet mountain evening. So, Willa said after a long silence, what happens now? Caleb looked at the cabin, then at the mountains beyond. Now we decide what we're building. They spent that evening talking. Real talking. Not survival planning or immediate decisions, but long-term thinking. What did they want? Not what was practical or necessary. What did they actually want? Caleb wanted land, real land, legally owned, a place that couldn't be taken away, somewhere to build something permanent. Willa wanted to teach. She had spent 7 years educating children. That calling hadn't changed, just the context. Sam wanted a home, stability, the knowledge that tomorrow would come and he would still be safe. I have money, Willa said. Small inheritance from my father. Maybe $300, enough to file a homestead claim. Buy supplies. Homestead Act requires improvements, Caleb said. Cabin cleared land cultivation. We'd have 5 years to prove it up. Can we do that? Together, yes. Alone, no. Then we do it together. Sam looked between them. All three of us. All three of us, Willa confirmed. The boy's face lit up with something Caleb had never seen there before. Not just happiness, hope, real lasting hope. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Caleb showed Willa and Sam how to identify good land. They needed water timber, defendable terrain, access to game. Most importantly, they needed land that wasn't already claimed and wasn't coveted by someone with more guns than morals. On the 4th day, they set out north. Everything they owned packed on Grant. 3 people and 1 mule searching for a future. The valley revealed itself on the afternoon of the 3rd day. They had climbed a long ridge fighting through dense pine forest when suddenly the trees opened, and there it was. A natural bowl in the mountains, maybe 300 acres of meadow and forest ringed by peaks that would shelter it from the worst weather. A stream ran through the center, clear and cold, fed by snowmelt. Game trails crossed the meadow. Birds circled overhead. The land felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with possibility. Willa stood at the ridge crest, looking down, and started to cry. What's wrong? Sam asked, concerned. Nothing's wrong, she said, wiping her eyes. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Caleb had to agree. In 3 years of mountain living, he had never found a spot this good. Defensible, fertile, beautiful. The kind of place where a person could build a life and actually believe it would last. They descended into the valley that evening. The meadow grass came up to Sam's waist, thick and green. The stream sang over smooth stones. A stand of aspens showed the first gold of autumn among their leaves. This is it, Caleb said. This is where we stay. They camped that night under the open sky, no shelter needed. The weather was mild, stars brilliant overhead. Sam fell asleep between Caleb and Willa, one hand holding each of theirs. After the boys slept, Caleb and Willa talked quietly. Are you sure about this? Caleb asked. Last chance to change your mind. Go back to the order. Return to the life you knew. I'm sure. The life I knew was safe but small. This is big, terrifying, real. She looked at him in the starlight. This is what I choose. I don't have much to offer. No money, no respectability, just hard work and an uncertain future. That's more than enough. Willa, I need you to understand, I'm not a good man. I've killed people, made terrible choices, failed when it mattered most. I know who you are. I've seen you scared and angry and desperate, and you're still the best man I've ever known. That's a low bar. Stop. She put her hand on his face, making him look at her. Stop punishing yourself for being human. You saved me. You protected Sam. You chose honor over comfort every single time. That's who you are. Who I'm trying to be. Same thing. Caleb pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her against the cooling night. I love you. Don't know when it happened exactly, but I do. I know, Willa said. I've known for days. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. When did you know? When you wrapped me in your coat at the waterfall. When you made Sam laugh. When you chose to fight 12 men rather than abandon us. She smiled. Probably all of those moments. Love doesn't start, it accumulates. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the stream and Sam's steady breathing. Above them, the Milky Way painted light across the darkness. The world felt very large and very small at the same time. We should get married, Caleb said. Is that a proposal? Bad one, I'll try again. Willa Morgan, will you marry me? Yes, obviously yes. No priest, no official ceremony, just us. Just us is perfect. When we've built something worth celebrating, when we have a home. Deal. The next morning they began building that home. Caleb had constructed cabins before. The process was straightforward if labor-intensive. Choose the site, clear the ground, cut logs, notch them, stack them, chink the gaps, raise a roof. Make it weatherproof. Simple in theory, brutal in practice. They worked from first light until dark every day. Caleb felled trees with his axe, showing Sam and Willa how to choose straight pines, how to strip bark, how to cut and drag the logs to the building site. The work destroyed their hands. Blisters rose and popped and calloused over. Muscles they didn't know they had screamed in protest. But slowly the cabin took shape. Caleb taught as they worked, not just how to build, but why. Why certain joints were stronger, why logs needed to be elevated off ground, why roof pitch mattered for snow load. You're teaching like there won't be a next time, Willa observed. Teaching like you might need to know someday when I'm not here. Don't talk like that. I'm not being morbid, just practical. These mountains don't care about plans. Accidents happen. You need to be able to finish what we start. She understood then. This wasn't just about building a cabin. It was about building independence, making sure she could survive without him if necessary. Sam absorbed everything like a sponge. At 8 years old, he learned to use a draw knife to mix chinking mud to cut roof shingles from cedar. The boy had always been clever. Now he was becoming capable. The difference mattered. 3 weeks into construction, they had 4 walls and a roof, no door yet, no windows, just a shell. But it was progress, real visible progress. That evening, exhausted and filthy, they sat around the fire, and Caleb produced a bottle he had been saving. Whiskey traded for beaver pelts 2 years ago and never opened. What's the occasion? Willa asked. We have walls. That's worth celebrating. He poured small measures into tin cups. Even gave Sam a tiny sip, which made the boy cough and sputter. To walls, Caleb said, raising his cup. To home, Willa added. To family, Sam finished. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, but warm from the inside. Around them, the valley darkened as stars emerged. Their valley, their home. I want to marry you now, Caleb said suddenly. Don't want to wait. Willa looked at him surprised. Now, why not we have walls? We have family. We have everything that matters. She smiled slowly. All right, now. They stood. Sam watched them, understanding something important was happening, even if he didn't fully grasp what. There was no ring. Caleb had nothing to offer but a wooden cross he had carved from cedar, matching the one Willa wore. She had kept hers despite leaving the order. Said it reminded her that faith took many forms. He hung the new cross around her neck next to the old one. I promise to build with you, Caleb said, to work beside you, to protect what we're making here. Willa produced a leather bracelet she had woven from strips of trapline. She tied it around his wrist. I promise to stand with you, she said, to share the burden, to choose you every day for as long as we both live. Simple vows, no poetry, no grand speeches, just honest words about honest intentions. Sam stepped forward, face serious. I'm a witness, like with the army papers. Best witness we could have, Caleb said. They sealed the promise with a kiss. Brief, tender, real. That night in the unfinished cabin with stars visible through gaps in the roof, they became husband and wife in all the ways that mattered. Not in the eyes of church or state, but in their own eyes and Sam's in the silent mountains that surrounded them. It was enough. The cabin was completed by mid-October. Door hung, windows shuttered, fireplace drawing clean, root cellar dug. It wasn't large, maybe 20 feet square, but it was solid, built to last. Caleb filed the homestead claim in Fort Collins, Willa's money paying the fees. 160 acres. 5 years to prove it up. The land was officially theirs. They settled into domestic routine. Caleb ran trap lines, hunted, provided meat. Willa established a garden site, preserved food for winter, maintained the home. Sam did both, learning everything from both parents. Because that's what they were now. Parents. Not by blood, but by choice. And choice, they learned, was stronger. Winter came early that year. By November, snow lay 3 feet deep in the valley. They were ready. Food stored. Wood stacked. The cabin stayed warm and dry. Isolated from the world, they created their own. Stories by firelight. Songs Sam half remembered from his mother. Willa teaching reading and arithmetic. Caleb teaching woodcraft and survival. 3 people becoming a family through the simple act of living together. In March, when the snow began to melt, visitors arrived. A family homesteading 5 miles south. They had heard about the valley, wanted to meet the neighbors. John and Martha Brennan, no relation to the lieutenant. 2 children, ages 5 and 9. Good people, hardworking, looking for the same thing Caleb and Willa had found. Safety, stability, home. More families followed. By summer of 1877, 6 homesteads dotted the valley. Not a town, not yet, but the beginning of community. Willa started teaching the children. Just twice a week at first, meeting in different homes. Reading, writing, basic mathematics. The education these frontier children would never receive otherwise. Caleb helped neighbors with construction, shared game when hunting was good, offered medical knowledge when someone was hurt. He didn't seek leadership, but people looked to him anyway, respected him, trusted him. Sam, now 8, had friends for the first time. Other children to play with, to compete with, to learn from. The haunted look gradually faded from his eyes. He was still serious, still cautious, but he laughed now. That mattered. In August, Willa told Caleb she was pregnant. They were checking the trap line together, Sam ranging ahead when she stopped and put his hand on her belly. There's someone new coming, she said. Caleb's mind went blank, then filled with terror. Are you sure? Very sure. I don't know how to be a father, not to a baby. You're already a father to Sam. That's different. Sam could talk, could walk, could survive. And this one will learn all of that. From us. The fear didn't go away, but underneath it, something else grew. Not happiness, shyly, more like wonder. The knowledge that they were creating something entirely new. A person who would carry forward what they had built. The baby was born in April of 1878. A girl. They named her Grace because that's what her arrival felt like. Unearned. Undeserved. Given freely anyway. Sam held his little sister with awkward gentleness, terrified he would break her. Willa taught him how to support her head, how to rock her when she cried. Caleb watched his son become a brother and felt something in his chest crack open. This was what he had run from for 3 years. Connection, responsibility, the vulnerability of caring about people who could be taken away. He had thought isolation was safety, but it had only been loneliness dressed up as wisdom. 2 more children followed. Thomas in 1880, named for Willa's brother. Mary in 1882. Each birth terrified Caleb. Each baby survived and thrived despite his fears. The valley grew. 15 families by 1885, 20 by 1890. Enough to need a real school. They built it together, all the men working, all the women feeding them. 2 rooms, wooden desks, a chalkboard ordered from Denver at ridiculous expense. Willa taught there every day, 3 grades in 1 room. Sam, now 19, helped with the older children. He had grown tall and capable, still serious, but no longer afraid of the world. Time moved forward, children grew, the valley prospered, and Caleb slowly learned that the weight of responsibility was lighter when shared. The old cabin, the one where everything had changed during that siege 25 years ago, still stood. Caleb rode past it, sometimes checking the structure, making sure no one had claimed it. It felt important to maintain it, a reminder of where they had been, what they had survived. On one such ride in autumn of 1901, he brought his granddaughter with him. Abigail was 19. Willa's first grandchild, Sam's daughter. Smart and strong-willed and ready to leave the valley for university in Denver. But afraid, too, afraid of making the wrong choice. So Caleb told her the story, all of it, the waterfall, the flight, the siege, the choice to stay. Now as the story ended and fire burned low in the hearth, Abigail sat quiet, processing everything. "You gave up everything," she said finally. "Your career, your freedom, your safety." "I gave up isolation," Caleb corrected. "Got something better in return." And grandmother, she gave up her vows. She gave up certainty, got truth instead. Abigail looked at the photograph on the wall. Willa at 53, still beautiful, still strong. She never regretted it. Never once, neither did I. How do you know when it's right, when to stay, and when to go? Caleb leaned back in his chair, feeling 62 years of living in his bones. You don't, not for certain. But here's what I learned. Running is easy, staying is hard, and the hard thing is usually the one worth doing. What if I fail? Then you fail, and you learn, and you try again. What if I can't come back? You can always come back. Home isn't a place, it's people, and people move. Abigail smiled, some of her tension easing. You're saying I should go. I'm saying you should choose. Whatever you choose it completely. Don't run, don't hide. Choose. She stood, kissed his weathered cheek. Thank you, grandfather. After she left for bed, Caleb sat alone with the fire in his memories. Tomorrow, Abigail would leave for Denver. Next month, Sam would help harvest the valley crops. Next spring, another baby would be born to one of the younger families. Life continuing, moving forward. Willa entered from the kitchen, moving slower now, gray-haired and worn from years of work and childbearing. But her eyes still held that same fierce determination he had first seen behind a waterfall 25 years ago. Did you help her? Willa asked, settling into her chair. Told her the truth. Whether that helps is up to her. The truth being that I was a coward who learned to be brave, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is stop running. Willa reached across the space between their chairs, found his hand, squeezed it. Not a coward, never were. Yes, I was, for a long time, until I met a nun who was braver than me. Former nun. Best kind. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to coals. Outside, the valley slept under autumn stars. Their valley. Their home. Built from nothing but choice and work and love. The next morning, Caleb rose early. Old habit. He made coffee, drank it watching sunrise paint the mountains gold and orange. Then he saddled his horse and rode north. He hadn't been to Clearwater Falls in 15 years. The trail was overgrown now, barely visible. But he remembered. Memory carried him back to that September day in 1876 when everything had changed. The waterfall looked smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he had just grown used to miracles. The water still fell clear and cold into the pool below. The rocks still provided hiding places, but the magic was gone. It was just a waterfall now. Caleb dismounted, walked to the pool's edge, knelt, drank from cupped hands. The water tasted exactly as it had 25 years ago, stone and pine and ice. Thank you, he said to the empty air. Thank you for bringing her here. Thank you for giving me a choice. Thank you for letting me choose right. He stood, stretched old muscles, looked around at the wilderness that had once been his whole world. It seemed smaller now, not because it had changed, because he had grown beyond it. Survival had once been enough. Living quietly, avoiding connection, hiding from responsibility. He had thought that was strength, but real strength, he had learned, was building something, was staying when running was easier, was opening yourself to pain because the alternative was an emptiness. He rode back to the valley as the sun climbed higher, back to his wife and his children and his grandchildren and the community they had built together. Back to the life he had chosen and kept choosing every day for 25 years. Some people found redemption in sacrifice. Others found it in suffering. Caleb had found it in something simpler, in stopping, in staying, in choosing love when fear would have been easier. And in the end, that had been enough. More than enough. Everything.